world. Ambazonia, land of freedom, usually plenty meets in our need. And your children shall be like the stars above. The Most High God being the watchman of this nation. Ambazonia, land of freedom, usually plenty meets in our need. And your children shall be like the stars above. The Most High God being the watchman of this nation.
Speaker did a great job with analyzing the situation, which in conflict studies terms are called mutual hurting stalemates and intervention. But I'm a little worried about the choice of language he used. In the concept of insurgents or insurgency or insurgent groups, insurgent movements. At one time, he even mentioned Southern Cameroon's insurgency. My worry is whether the speaker will be able to address that kind of language with respect to the Southern Cameroon's war of independence. He did cite cases of Afghanistan, Zimbabwe, Angola, etc. And I'm worried because we're talking about intervention to bring peace. In such great analysis on the literature of mutual hurting stalemates, will perceptions not matter a lot, especially when we use the kind of language the speaker has used in referring to a people fighting in self-defense to restore their independence, which was voted for at the United Nations General Assembly, which is nothing that anyone can compare to Afghanistan, Zimbabwe, Angola, or some of the examples he used. My question therefore is whether he can address the context of the language he used a lot in terms of insurgency. Was he just talking in general terms, or was he referring to the Southern Cameroon's question? Thank you.
Well, thank you for the observation. When I was using the term insurgent, I was, of course, speaking about insurgencies in general. That's fine, but the language does matter. But I was using it in a general sense to apply to an insurgency, all insurgencies. And at least in the contexts and the places I'm familiar with, we use the word on both sides. It actually doesn't have a positive or a negative connotation to it, but I understand. The expression freedom fighter is much preferred in some quarters. Speaking from the American perspective, that Americans were considered insurgents until we won, at which point we became, the patriots. But say it's a linguistic question. Obviously, I was using it in somewhat of a generic term, not suggesting there was any that not to equate, say, the Southern Cameroonian insurgents, say, with Joseph Komi's Lord's United Army. They are not the same. It's not the same thing at all. So I was I would hopefully, I was not intending to use it with any sort of qualitative meaning to it, but rather to refer to peoples that are, and therefore their armed forces and political forces that are challenging an incumbent regime. And that was the use that I would make of it. So
So won't we think that that use of a generic term might impact the way the outside world views the conflict?
it depends on who in the outside world. I would say generally not. Though one could just as one can overuse the word insurgent, and usually there's better terms to use, particularly as you've noted in the context of an independence movement. That could be sort of once again freedom fighters. I heard that frequently over the years. That's one. It could be patriots or even just members of the Ambazonian liberation movements or independence movements. So there's a lot of other words to use, and those it's particularly in a systematic or political warfare propaganda effort. One wants to be very careful to choose words properly, to use the right words that are going to have the right meaning, the right significance to the people who are hearing them. So I understand the point very well.
Thank you very much. That was a very powerful presentation, and I really enjoyed it. And I want also to commend you from coming from 1,000 miles to be present here. It shows how you, a non-African and a non-Ambazonian, is able to sacrifice your time for our liberation. To follow what His Royal Highness just mentioned, maybe you can educate me and educate the world about this, because La République has successfully tell the world that it is an international, an internal problem, and also stipulating that it is the southern Cameroon. And we know that every country in the world has a southern part. We know that southern Cameroon, as the name goes, La République has intelligently used that southern Cameroon to deceive the world that it is the southern Cameroon of the Cameroon, which these are two different countries. The southern Cameroon that we talk about is the British Southern Cameroon, because there used to be the British Northern Cameroon. How can you help us educate the world that the deception that La République has continuously to use this appellation to deceive the world that it is an internal issue, that it needs to be resolved internally, which you really understand. Tomorrow would be the 60th anniversary of the British Southern Cameroon independence, which is the first democratic independent country in Africa. Before French Cameroon got its independence on the 1st of January. So how can you help us? Because our problem, as I see it, is a problem of educating the international community. And if there is any help that we can get out there, is to be able to educate the international community about our identity as Southern Cameroonians, that these are two nations. When you talk of insurgency, it confuses me, because these are separate nations, one invading another one, and also usurping its identity. So in this light, how can you help us really educate the world?
Well, I don't know how much I can do. I'm like the Swiss gentleman. I've got limited influence, but as I noted, an independence movement, it needs its political component and the propaganda component, the educational part of it, as a fundamental requirement to work. If there's an armed wing of it, they need to work together. And the better they work together, the more effective it is. But you have to, as you've noted, sir, you have to explain why, sort of what it is you're about, why you want it, and convince the world of the justice of your position. And I have read things that have been put out but this needs to be done, as I say, systematically. And you have to, you've got to sort of get the right people involved in it and propagandize it. It's absolute requirement. And since I'm in Massachusetts, I mentioned the Irish Republican Army, which conducted an the Irish who conducted an insurgency against the British they would tell you for 250 years, but certainly for a good 40. And they had a very effective propaganda arm to the point that most of their funding came from Boston and New York. But they would educate the Irish American communities on the struggles, et cetera, et cetera. But it is that educational approach that is required in order to sort of influence the right governments, the right organizations around the world. And that it's public relations isn't quite the right word, but it is getting the word out. And but in Southern Cameroon's case is particularly important, as you've noted, because that distinction between, to point out that this is not guys trying to break away from Cameroons, but rather people who never wanted to be part of it in the first place. But clearly articulating that is essential. And say, for example, if you go to Capitol Hill, that, if you can, you do meet, say, staff members or interested congressmen, if you get a one pager that lays this out, so that when people hear Southern Cameroons, they think, oh, independent country. You want that to be the first thing they associate with. But it does require getting the message out in the right way. And there's no simple way to do it, but but it's a lot of it is kind of commonsensical, that you put the message in a form that the person you want to hear it is going to hear it and internalize it very quickly, and ideally do something about it.
Thank you very much.
Before we take the next question, I just want to thank the speaker for this brilliant presentation. I want to add to the last two questions. This presentation cannot be mistaken. That he has called our country's work insurgency. There's a difference between what this speaker has said and what we call, in the language experts call, bias or slant language. Bias or slant language is that the using of those words like Bia is fond of. He said when he was announcing the invasion of Southern Cameroons that he was attacking secession. Part of his country was seceding, and terrorism, that there was terrorism in the Northwest and Southwest. And since the events started, you often hear from East Cameroon about secessionists and terrorists and extremists and words like that. Those are biased words. Those are slant words. Those are meant to persuade people to see the problem from a certain angle, a biased angle. But in language used ordinarily, we have to look both in the context of what the person is saying, and we can sort out what is biased and what is not biased. And I can say that the present speaker was not using the topic he's spoken on from a biased position. No. Thank you very much for your brilliant presentation. The question of the second questioner about the fact that Southern Cameroons, even in the legal institutions that we have gone through, the courts and in human rights, cases like human rights organization, Cameroon has tried to say that when they say Southern Cameroons, they mean the southern part of their country is seceding. They have said it. It came out in Banjul and in other places before that. And the questioner was asking how we can fight back that. I think the speaker made a brilliant presentation, and it is us to work out how we can do that. For now, I will suggest only one or two ways. One, I suggest that we should go back writing the official name of our country, the Southern Cameroons, fully. One is in everything you say or write, don't say Southern Cameroon, say the Southern Cameroons. The Southern Cameroons, that's the full name of our country. It is not Southern Cameroons. There's a difference between the two.
Mr. Newsham, thank you so much. Your presentation has been quite timely, quite timely in the sense that we are at a stage in the conflict in Southern Cameroon where both sides appear to have gotten into what you call war fatigue, fighting fatigue. You look at La Republique, they seem to be fatigued, and Southern Cameroon is fatigued. So it looks like the conflict is ripe for settlement, for negotiations. And in your presentation, you talk about strategies for ending an insurgency. It's rich in theory, and it's rich in empirical case studies. Many of the anecdotes that you cited in your presentation, we can identify with in Southern Cameroon. Many of the facts, many of the analogies you drew with Somalia, Namibia, and other conflicts around Asia, we can actually identify with. There's infighting amongst the various groups in Southern Cameroon. There's a need to find common ground. There's a need to look at who the statesmen in the conflict are. There's a need to bring all the forces together to sit down, begin thinking about how to make peace, how to end the conflict. So it is very timely. We need to start thinking about how to end this insurgency. We need to start thinking, not just us Southern Cameroonians, but I think the world community, La Republique, the international community, the UN Security Council. We need to start figuring out, now following some of the strategies that you shared here with us, looking at the cases that have worked in other parts of the world and seeing how we can actually borrow from those successful case studies and apply them in Southern Cameroon to bring this, 5-year-old war. I mean, World War I lasted less than 4 years, World War I. The war in Southern Cameroon has lasted, 5 years and counting. World War II lasted 6 years. So come next year, this war in Southern Cameroon would have lasted as long as, World War II. 2 weeks ago, Washington folded and moved out of Afghanistan. Why did they do it? Because they had become war fatigued. Mentally and psychologically, America had become fatigued after 20 years of fighting. Now, Southern Cameroonians are fatigued. La Republique is fatigued. And even international voices that have been speaking for us, the Thibault Nagy and others, they too have become fatigued. And this is a war that is ripe for ending. And your ideas, your theories, they right on time. We need to start thinking and looking at how we could apply those theories to bring this conflict to an end. Thank you so much. Let's give him a standing applause.
In this paper, talked about certain things which I will just summarize. To say that Southern Cameroon is in the middle of nowhere, I'm choosing a conflicting point in our struggle and in our experience for the last 60 years, in which what the United Nations says about Southern Cameroons and what we say. The United Nations says that British Southern Cameroons has been decolonized, and that is the official position in the United Nations. If you read anywhere about decolonization, that British Southern Cameroons has been decolonized, and because of that, you will not find it among the countries that are still to be decolonized. They have been decolonized. I'm sorry that I'm taking up this topic when we have not heard first paper by Dennis, Mr. Dennis, because we should have heard why Southern Cameroons, we Southern Cameroonians think that our country has not yet been decolonized. We also chose that topic to be the first paper because we thought it will explain the first central problem in our decolonization. This second paper was supposed to be on annexation, but we widened the scope in the title, the final title that I'm talking about. So the United Nations is saying that Southern Cameroons is not more on the list of territories to be decolonized. And the paper we are still to listen to from Mr. Atemke argues, explains why we have not been decolonized. And it gives explanation and quotation from the UN texts and resolutions. If we as Southern Cameroonians are saying we have not been decolonized, and if you go to the UN, you get papers that petitions that have been written by various Southern Cameroons group to the committee in the United Nations that is in charge, the fourth committee, that is in charge of decolonization. Those petitions from all those groups, none has been replied. They don't reply. And I remember we wrote one asking to appear in that committee and participate in their discussions as Southern Cameroons, and even that was not replied. So where is Southern Cameroons? If it has not been decolonized, it is still a UN trust territory. And that is why we still call it British Southern Cameroons. And those who still call it British Southern Cameroons are right. It has not been decolonized. It has not been decolonized because we can see from your United Nations trust texts that actually they started the process of decolonizing Southern Cameroons, and the process did not finish. It ended halfway. And the department in the United Nations that is in charge of decolonization, that is the Trusteeship Council. We can see from their own record, official records, that on the 21st of April, when our matter was to come officially in front of the General Assembly, that Trusteeship Council 3 days earlier, had recommended what was going before the General Assembly on the 21st of April, and the recommendation from the Trusteeship Council reminded the United Nations General Assembly that they had made a commitment to the electorate of Southern Cameroons in the plebiscite, that after the plebiscite, there will be a post-plebiscite conference in which the United Nations will be involved and in which the administering authority that is written will be involved, and that the meeting, the General Assembly meeting of the 21st April 1961 should take up that issue and nominate 3 constitutional and administrative experts to attend that conference, that post-plebiscite conference. This is the report of the Trusteeship Council on the 18th of April 1961. And their report was the last thing that department was telling the United Nations as a report. And usually reports from that department always went through or always goes through without any amendment at the level of the General Assembly. But in the case of Southern Cameroons, it was amended. Paragraph 6 of that report from the Trusteeship Council was deleted by the time that the General Assembly was adopting that as a resolution. The General Assembly adopted that resolution as that report from the Trusteeship Council as Resolution 1608. That resolution came as a report from the Trusteeship Council. So who removed that, we will not go into who removed that paragraph 6, but paragraph 5, from paragraph 1 to paragraph 5 remains as the Trusteeship Council recommended. So who are we going to take? Do we take the Southern Cameroon side that we have not been decolonized, or the United Nations position that Southern Cameroons has been decolonized? They don't appear among the territories that have been decolonized, that have been decolonized, and they don't feature as a sovereign state with independence. The independence that Resolution 1608 approved for Southern Cameroons to begin on the 1st of October 1961 seems to have been suppressed. A resolution of the highest organ of the United Nations. We are not enjoying it. So Southern Cameroons actually is in the middle of nowhere. That is the title. That is why I chose to speak on that title, to clarify that position and give the background to that. I've spoken in the paper about annexation. All of us understand the word annexation. I don't intend to define it, but when we speak about it as Southern Cameroons, what we are saying is that the agreement, the agreement between the two states, the two Cameroons, before the plebiscite, the United Nations plebiscite, the two states had agreed that if they were going to join together, it would be two states on the basis of equality. That was a written agreement between British Southern Cameroons and French Cameroons, two states of equal status, not one being the provinces of another. So the annexation, when we say of annexation here, the first thing that the people of Southern Cameroon are saying is that the French Cameroon side, the French state of French Cameroon, or they call it Republic of Cameroon, has taken over, has breached the agreement that they made in writing and signed before the plebiscite. There has been infringement. They have taken over the territory of Southern Cameroons, and not only that, they have imposed their laws, their system of education, and everything on their own culture from their own side, and they are forcing Southern Cameroons to be absorbed, to speak their own language, take their own laws and their own system of education, and forget what was the Southern Cameroon position. After annexation, the policy of the government after annexation has been assimilation. And assimilation simply meant that, in fact, at the background of this war is the fact that is the fact of annexation. And President Biya himself said this in Paris during one meeting, that they have all along tried to assimilate the Northwest and Southwest, what they call the Northwest and Southwest. And but their problem has been that there are differences of culture. That policy has not succeeded. But he said this, and he did not say that they are abandoning it. It's continuing. So assimilation is used by the Republic of Cameroon. The term they use is not assimilation, or annexation or assimilation. What they use in Cameroon is that they were strengthening national unity. That is the roundabout way which they put the term annexation and assimilation. They do everything in education to change to the system of education on the French-speaking side. They will say for national unity. They see it as a good thing. They don't see it as asking the English-speaking people to change their own way of educate, their own laws and system of laws or system of schooling or whatever. And language, although it is in the constitution that Cameroon is a bilingual country, when it comes to it practically, if you were in Boya or Bamenda and you were walking around government offices, every language, everything you hear inside is French. You would think you are in the French part of the country. The head of that of any department you meet in Boya or Bamenda or wherever in the English-speaking side will be a Francophone. And he conducts his meetings in French. And then finally, they decided to impose their own system of laws. And what the approach they took was they flooded the English-speaking side with French-speaking magistrates who just arrived and told the lawyers in the southern Cameroons that they have to do their submissions and presentations in French. And the lawyer said, no, no way. And they told the teachers, all teachers in government schools, from primary school to secondary, primary schools in particular, to teach French in the primary schools without any previous training in the teaching of that language. But when they take Anglophones to teach in the French side, they take English-speaking people and they teach good English to children on the Francophone side. In the Anglophone side, they just give instructions to classroom teachers, especially in the primary, to teach French, who were not trained in their training. They are not been prepared to teach French. They themselves are not competent in the language. You can't teach a language which you can't speak yourself. Well, that is about language and the law, which typifies what is happening. Now, I've spoken in the paper about the invasion and the solving of a political problem with arms. We Southern Cameroons has throughout the 60 years that we are celebrating today, challenged the Republic of Cameroon to make public the official instrument, the Treaty of Union, by which these two Cameroons, they were French, under the French, we were under the British. And if they are claiming jurisdiction over the southern Cameroons, what instrument, what legal instrument can they show the world that we officially, southern Cameroons officially came under its jurisdiction? Was there anything like a Treaty of Union? Or was there any legal instrument by which southern Cameroons became officially part of their country? Because we were, the two Cameroons, both were under international jurisdiction. That is, France was ruling French Cameroon, Britain was ruling British Cameroons. And if they are really one country now officially, the normal way that countries and states do things, there should be a treaty, there should be some legal instrument by which the leaders of those countries signed to say from today, we are one country and our boundaries have merged and our boundaries have shifted and so on. There should be such a document. But we are saying as Southern Cameroonians that it is not that, it is annexation. Annexation is just that one big country, usually in history and in Cameroon, one big country uses its power, it can be military power, to take the other one, and once you use military power to suppress it and rule it. It's as simple as that. That is what annexation is. We were not part of them. And another important thing, there is still one important paper we are to listen to, whether today or tomorrow. As trust territories of the United Nations, the two Cameroons, each of them as a separate territory, trust territory, had or has till this moment its complete international boundaries, complete boundaries established by international treaties. That is coming up in a paper in this conference, and I will not go further than that. So the point I want to make here is, if for the Republic of Cameroon to claim jurisdiction over southern Cameroons, there must be somehow where a legal instrument where these boundaries were changed or modified since Republic of Cameroon got its independence on a separate 1 year before British Southern Cameroons. That 1 year, when they got, on the date they got their own independence, British Southern Cameroons was not part of their territory. So there must be some instrument registered at the United Nations by which you can legally say this is part of our country. That is what I have said in this paper. Finally, in my paper, I have turned to one thing. This section I'm talking, there are pictures in the paper. When they publish them, you'll see pictures. Or you go to SCAPO website and you see the pictures there, the pictures I'm talking now. The picture, we have ended with the picture of 3 of our leaders, 3 leaders of Southern Cameroon at the time that the crucial events was taking place. Our first Prime Minister was Dr. Emmanuel Ifafe Ndele. Our second Prime Minister was Dr. John Foncha. And the third person in the picture I'm talking, which you can find on SCAPO website, is PM Kale. And in the picture, you will see these 3 gentlemen laughing and shaking hands. And I want to end with this picture because it prints the differences in our political operation between Anglophones, between Southern Cameroons and the Republic of Cameroon. And what is the thing? The thing is that in 1959, the government of Southern Cameroons conducted an election into parliament. And in this election, the prime minister, the first prime minister was the one in power who conducted that election. He's in the picture, tall gentleman you see, the tallest one they call Dr. Indele. He conducted that general election and he did not win. The leader of the opposition won the election. The third gentleman, Mr. P.M. Kale, was the speaker in the House of Parliament. And the three of them were of different, yes, they are all gone. Were of different parties. Dr. Ndele, the prime minister, different party. Dr. John Foncha, the opposition leader, who won the election in 1959, of a different party. P.M. Kale, the speaker in parliament, a different party. Now, you see them shaking and laughing in the picture. And that picture was taken immediately after the election. This picture was taken immediately after the election. And Dr. Foncha, the leader of opposition, was coming now to Boya and to change places in parliament with the prime minister. And here was our first prime minister shaking hands with the man who had defeated him and laughing with Kale, the speaker. Now, I brought that picture to end this paper because it tells one thing, irrefutable, about our own system of a democracy. We had been ruling ourselves, we had been independent or self-governing for only 7 years. And this was the first general election. And the person who organized that election was defeated. And he shakes hands with the person who defeated him and considered defeat. He considered defeat. And I want to say that we have been with the Republic of Cameroon for 60 years, and Southern Cameroonians like Fundi in 1992 won the election, or is regarded to be the one who carried the highest vote. He was put in a house and placed under arrest, house arrest, for 3 months, while Mr. Biya was installed as president, backed by France. And for these 60 years, we have seen another kind of democracy, which is still a democracy, but is different from our own democracy. And we don't think that Southern Cameroon should submit itself to the form of democracy, which is another kind of democracy. We prefer our own. Thank you for your kind attention.
Oh, thank you very much, Pa, for the presentation. The question I'd like to ask that I've not heard through these conferences, it looks like we are really struggling from our identity. Long before, no one could pronounce the name Ambazonian. Our valiant fighters on the ground have fought so much. The name Ambazonian has become a household name now in the international community. I am just wondering, is it accidental that I have not heard for the various presenters mention the name Ambazonia? or maybe someone can address how now the international community has come to take the name that we are calling, but still in all the presentations, that name has not come out. I'm asking, is it accidental or by design?
That was a good question.
Okay. If you listened when I started, I think I made the point that I think the word Southern Cameroons is our history. When you call it Southern Cameroons, you are talking from a historical point of view. And the point I made at the beginning, the fact that up till now that we're holding this conference, that name Southern Cameroons, which was our historical name before independence, we have not yet been decolonized. When Mr. Dennis gives his paper, you will hear the reason why we have not been decolonized. But if you call Southern Cameroons, you are not wrong. Anybody who uses Southern Cameroon is speaking from the historical perspective. The name Ambazonia is the name that we ourselves, all the Southern Cameroons has given to itself, and is the name that is going to go on into our history when we completely seize our territory. But if you use the word Southern Cameroons, you are not wrong, because it's the historical name. That's the first thing. We were that British Cameroons in our history under the League of Nations and under the trusteeship agreement. And we have achieved independence, or as we are under a suppressed independence. Our own way of identifying our territory is that we are called Ambazonia. That should be clear. It is not that if you don't call the word Ambazonia now, you are talking both you can say Southern Cameroons, also called Ambazonia, you are correct. You can say Southern Cameroons, you are correct in the sense that that territory has not yet been decolonized. You can call it Ambazonia because that is what we in Southern Cameroons have decided to call our country. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. But I was just adding that when someone is baptized or Christian, you also, it doesn't mean that you will forget your old name. I think that it is incumbent on us to educate the international community that Southern Cameroon, as you have rightly said, now called the Republic of Ambazonia, because earlier we did see how La République is skillfully and deceptively using the Southern Cameroon to bring us into their own Southern Cameroon. I think it's incumbent on us so that we educate the international community.
Yes, that's a good point.
In an international conference like this, we say Southern Cameroon, now known as the Republic of Ambazonia. We don't have to let someone come and educate ourselves. I think it is courageous for us to name ourselves and let the world call us by the name that we want to be identified.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think we have Mr. Agbo-Derrick's hand is up. You have the floor.
Thank you, sir. I'll start by thanking the organizers. I'll start by thanking the organizers for this wonderful opportunity. I think it actually gives us the floor to examine the Ambazonian problem. I like to call it Ambazonian problem because it is the problem that brought this war we are in. Contrary to what Cameroon publicized outside there, that it is an Anglophone problem. Anglophone problem is a particular problem within La République du Cameroon. But the Ambazonian problem is about our fighting for Cameroon to end its annexation of our territory. My question actually goes to Pa, and I'm really inspired by what the priest said, that we should look at ourselves and do what is right, say what is right. And from there, the truth comes out. And from that truth, we can now be able to attain that peace. And for that peace to come in, there must be justice. And from past presentation, I have not heard anywhere where he presented the mistakes of our leaders. Because it appears Ambazonians, or let me say Southern Cameroonians, as he said, are pointing fingers just to other people, forgetting themselves. There's nobody come out with any paper whatsoever to specify the mistakes our parents did. Because if we do not learn from our own mistakes, then it will be difficult to correct others. I will give simple examples so that I can explain further to us why are we pointing at the UN and maybe Britain. Because I am an Ambazonian and I believe that that territory was decolonized. I believe that. Why I say that? Because you cannot say you have independence without decolonization. You only decolonize, you have independence once you are decolonized, and that's why we have Resolution 1608. Now the problem here was the failure came at the implementation of the sovereignty. And who was the cause? The UN has its own fault, and the Ambazonian leaders at that time, they were not children. They were not some kind of kindergarten children who were just dragged from left to right and imposed in on them. If we look at Article 76B, it is clearly stated that the independence the people got was according to their wishes. It means, and when we look at the trusteeship agreement, there were also provisions that the people had a say into that. So I don't think the UN was some kind of organization that did not know what they were doing. I don't think they didn't consult the people. They did. And our leaders make a very, very, in short, they made several mistakes. I'll give one example. All the trust territories that were that attained independence registered their sovereignty at the level of the UN. Example, Tanganyika, you have decolonized territories like Tanganyika and Zanzibar. They became independent, registered their sovereignty, and they formed a country known as Tanzania. You come even at the level of, you take Senegal, Gambia. You take even La République du Cameroon. They were all trust territory. They registered their sovereignty. What happened to the Southern Cameroon? Did our leaders do that? Were they prevented from doing it? And if they were, where is the document? We as young Ambazonians grow, we would like to know all those things. And then my second question to Pa is that if our leaders were infallible as we claim to show, what happened when they discovered that Cameroon had annexed us? Why were they following Cameroon from 1961 up to 2016, where we the younger people now are fighting, when people like Pandamga are there? Why did they stop it? Because in past presentation, he has not shown us any research he made where those mistakes of our leaders are there. So I would like him maybe to say something about that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much. The questioner thinks I am not balanced in my view or I am biased against the United Nations. No. If I was to start with the matter of the faults or mistakes of our leaders. I could write a paper or a book on that. But I think that we may need maybe a week for this kind of meeting. But let me give you just a few examples, which are not necessary. I did it deliberately. I'm not saying our leaders did not make mistakes. If you take the so-called Fumban Conference that produced the first constitution for a United Republic of Cameroon, that constitution is called the Federal United, the Constitution of the Federation of United Cameroon. But it was imposed on our leaders in Fumban. That Fumban conference, as I say, I think in this very paper, was an unauthorized event. It was an unauthorized event because the General Assembly had appointed a committee, a tripartite committee in paragraph 5 of Resolution 1608, and given it the assignment on behalf of the United Nations, assignment to work out all the details that were necessary legally for British Cameroons to join the Republic of Cameroon. They did. And who were the members of this tripartite committee? The British as administering authority, the Republic of Cameroon as the receiving state, and of course, the government of the Southern Cameroons. This is in paragraph 5 of 1608. And till today, that committee did not do its work. We'll just say it did not do its work because there's no report of that committee anywhere. Instead, the Republic brushed aside that assignment by the General Assembly and went and convened a constitutional conference in Fumban. During the duration that the General Assembly had given for that committee to make all the preparation for Southern Cameroons to join that. Now, so Fumban was unauthorized by the United Nations. And our people still went when Ahidjo summoned Fumban conference. That was a mistake by our people to accept to go when that was not an official conference convened by the United Nations as part of the decolonization of Southern Cameroons. It was Ahidjo's government trying to annex Southern Cameroons for the benefit to expand the territory of his country. That was a mistake. But we can blame our leaders. We can blame our leaders. We can also blame Britain. Why not? Because what was this trusteeship agreement between administering authorities and the United Nations all about? This was international guardian for administering trust territories. And Britain was not in Fumban. Where were they? When our leaders were going, where were they? That's a blame. Yes, but our leaders accepted to go. We blame them. We blame Britain too. That's not to say we are biased against, we are not pointing out the faults of our leaders. Another fault of our leaders, that is not even during the colonial, I'm bringing this point of blaming because he's saying that even we now, who are leaders, where were we when this was happening? Let me tell you that in 1995, the Anglophones held the biggest conference about our matter in Buea. It's called AAC, All Anglophone Conference. That conference was attended by more than 7,000 Anglophone elites. And at the end of that conference, they decided that one action to take on our matter now is to send a delegation to the United Nations to say that our country has been annexed. So they went, 9 of them, delegation, and presented a petition to the United Nations Secretary General on the annexation of the Southern Cameroons. Many of our young fighters now are saying things happen like this, or the older generation did nothing. This 9-man delegation to the United Nations presented a resolution titled the annexation of Southern Cameroon, against annexation of Southern Cameroon. There, I was part of the arrangement and everything about that delegation. I can see the mistake that we made. We went there and we talked about annexation. Our delegation talked about annexation and discussed it with the Secretary General's office of the United Nations, 1995 only. But what was the mistake? The mistake was that the first biggest thing in our struggle is what Mr. Dennis Atemken is going to talk about in his paper. And what is that paper? That we have not been, Southern Cameroons till today has not been decolonized. They should have talked on that with the United Nations. Instead, they talked about something that is true, annexation, but talking to the United Nations about decolonization, our own decolonization is more important. It's more important. That I can see. I was part of that delegation. We did that. So I can see even our own mistakes, and we should talk about it. But this conference, we want to talk on things that can move this struggle forward. If we come back and we come here and we are only talking about the mistakes that were made, we are using, I think we are not using our time valuably well. And finally, you say I have made research. They don't know where I've made research. I am not a researcher, I'm retired, but at least the story of our country I've contributed by writing a book, and the book is entitled Seated at Dawn, Seated at Dawn, the abortive decolonization, the aborted decolonization of British Southern Cameroon. That's my own struggle. That's my own contribution to the struggle. Thank you.
Thank you. But before I turn over to Pa to remind us and why we're here, I should take also the opportunity to thank all our presenters today.
Every good thing must come to an end. Every good day must wrap up. And we are so delighted, so thankful. Today's been inspiring. All of the presentations have been intellectually empowering, and they have been historically and politically inspiring. We are going to continue tomorrow. It's going to be equally informing, equally empowering, more diverse, because tomorrow we're going to have panel discussions. I'm so delighted. I would like to thank our technical team led by Scott Lynch, our beloved friend from the other world, Hawaii. We would like to collectively adopt you. He is so knowledgeable on Africa. Spent time in Zimbabwe, in the Congo, in Southwest Africa, you name it. And so what brings us joy is the reminder that about some 8,000 years ago, his roots are traceable back to Africa. Yeah. And so when that Freedom Day comes, you come with us. We're holding your hand and you come with us. We invite you to come back tomorrow. We invite you to stay with us through to Saturday. We'll be sharing that barbecue together and singing those freedom songs together. Our MC, I think you're probably the youngest in this room. It gives us delight.
To Boston, let's put our hands together to give an energetic welcome to Jalemi.
Thank you. Thank you very much. My name is Jalemi. I am a very proud Ambazonian. I am a reggae artist from the Republic of Ambazonia.
Yes.
Isn't it wonderful?
Amen.
Thank you. And the song I'm going to perform this evening is called Ambazonian People. Thank you. I dedicate this song to all the Ambazonian people who are suffering and dying in the prisons. And the only crime they committed is being honest, fighting for equal right and justice.
Freedom.
Fighting for freedom.
Wow.
I dedicate this song to all the women, Ambazonian women, who are suffering and dying, being raped every single day by Cameroonian soldiers. I dedicate this song to the innocent Ambazonian children who are suffering and dying in the hands of Cameroonian soldiers every single day, and the whole world is watching.
Baby Martha, 4 months old. Mami Api, La République du Cameroun soldiers.
African Union is watching.
Samsoya. Gabo 23.
I dedicate this song to the refugees, the Ambazonian refugees, who are suffering and dying from all sorts of illnesses in Nigeria, in Ghana, and across Africa. They did not belong there. They were supposed to be in Ambazonia, living their normal lives. And I dedicate this song to all Ambazonian freedom fighters. Doesn't matter where you are. I have one thing to say. Ambazonia must be free. We must be free.
Free.
Ambazonia will be free.
Yes. Be free.
Thank you.
Live free or die. Live free or die.
Ambazonian people, we are tired of the torture. We are tired of the beatings and the killings of the southern Cameroonians. They are sending all their soldiers to occupy our nation. They are sending all their soldiers, they are raping our women. They are loading all the prisons with Ambazonian people. United Nations, are you really truly watching how they massacre our people? They are burning our houses, they are burning our people. We have become like slaves in our own sweet home. Ambazonian people, this is our moment. Ambazonian people, we need to stand up for our freedom. No more killings, our people are dying. organizing, killing our people. So breathing, where are you? From Nebia to Mesa, they're killing our people. Ambazonian people, stand up for your freedom. Ambazonian people, this is our moment. Ambazonian people, we need to stand up for our freedom. No more killings, our people are dying. No more torture, and children are dying. Ambazonian people, this is our moment. Ambazonian people, we need to stand up for our freedom. Together we can build a better nation. Ambazonia. Together we can build a better nation, free from killings. Together we can build a better nation, Ambazonia. Together we can build a better nation, free from corruption.